So this Aqidah an-Nasafiyya, it is one of the classical works in Aqidah for Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And this is, like we said, this is Maturidi document here. And Bismillah. So we covered where the author says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qala an-Nasafi rahimahullah, Qala Ahlul Haqq, the people of the truth said, but I forgot to explain for you what al-haqq means. The truth. The confirmed matter that complies with reality. Al-amru thabitu al-muwafiqu lil-waqi'. Oh, al-mutabiqu lil-waqi'. Al-amru thabit, the confirmed matter. Al-mutabiqu lil-waqi', that complies with reality. And you could even add to that, which is not permissible to deny. So that's al-haqq. That's not al-haqq as a name of Allah, though. Al-haqq as a name of Allah means the real God. So we read that he said, haqa'iqul ashya'i thabita, the realities of things are confirmed. Yani, things really exist. That's the creed of Ahlus Sunnah. It's not imaginary. وَالْعِلْمُ بِهَا مُتَحَقِّقٌ, and the knowledge about those real things is verified. He wants to tell us about the causes of knowledge, and he wants to tell us what type of knowledge they cause also. There's two types of knowledge. We talked about the first one last week, which was the ilm daruri, necessary knowledge, automatic knowledge, knowledge that the human being cannot repel from himself. And he is triggered to realize that. That's knowledge that he's triggered to realize. There's nothing he can do to stop himself. The other type of knowledge is ilm iktisabi, earned knowledge. Earned knowledge. Acquired knowledge. That means this is knowledge that has some effort behind it. It's not just automatic on your part. There's some effort behind it. That means there's a proof behind it. Basically, necessary knowledge doesn't require a proof beforehand. It doesn't require a proof beforehand. So you see, we gave examples. There's a person right there in the room with you. So you don't say, what's the proof that this person is right here in the room with me? So that's ilm daruri. And there's another called ilm iktisabi. Iktisabi means it's earned. It doesn't come automatic. You need to base it on something. So we'll see as we go here. So we already covered the sound senses. Now he wants to go on to the next cause of knowledge for the creations. He says, وَالْخَبَرُ الصَّادِقُ عَلَى نَوْعَيْنِ. Truthful information is of two types. أَحَدُهُمَا الْخَبَرُ الْمُتَوَاتِرُ. The first of those two is al-khabarul mutawatir. I'm going to translate that as successive mass report. Successive mass report.
Mutawatir, like as a hadith being mutawatir.
Correct.
That is narrated through so many chains of narration that the possibility of it being corrupted is none.
Correct. With some other conditions, which you mentioned, with some other conditions, including amongst those conditions is that it's based on witnessing. That's a condition. Khabar mutawatir, the initial report has to be an event, as opposed to a deduction, for example. And a deduction is like saying God exists. The existence of God is not an event, because event means something that has a beginning. So that's not something, yani, even if all the people in the world said God exists, that's not khabar mutawatir. Not by definition. Because by definition, khabar mutawatir must be based on an event that was witnessed. An event that was witnessed means like seeing Muhammad existing. He is the event, alayhi salatu wassalam. Or World War II, for example, that's an event. Or the likes of that. Like slavery in America, that's an event.
Or the beginning of creation.
Or beginning of creation, that's an event, but we didn't witness that.
Okay.
So it's not going to be khabar mutawatir. Yes.
So it's something that has to be witnessed. That's the key word in it. Has to be witnessed.
Yes, it's an event that has to be witnessed. Both of those are key. Those are shurut. Those are conditions for tawatur. It has to be an event, and it has to be witnessed. And the witnesses have to be so many. He's going to tell us. So it says here, وَالْخَبَرُ الصَّادِقُ عَلَى نَوْعَيْنِ. Truthful information is of two categories. So it gives us the first. أَحَدُهُمَا الْخَبَرُ الْمُتَوَاتِرُ. The first of those two is the successive mass report. He defines it. وَهُوَ الثَّابِتُ عَلَى أَلْسِنَةِ قَوْمٍ. It is the confirmed news, the news confirmed upon the tongues of a people. الثابت. وَهُوَ الثَّابِت. الثابت means what's confirmed, verified. على ألسنة قوم, upon the tongues of a folk, some folks' tongues. Yani it's a report. لا يتصور تواطؤهم على الكذب. What's the description of these people? How would we describe these people? Any people under any circumstance or not? No. Not under any circumstance. Rather, لا يتصور تواطؤهم على الكذب. Their conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. A people who's conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. That means their numbers. A people whose numbers are so great that they're conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. لا يتصور, inconceivable. Now, if someone knows the mental judgments, we were talking about some of them last week. We said the existence of Allah is necessary, mental necessity. That's mental judgment. There's also mental possibility and mental impossibility. 3 mental judgments. So someone might say, hold on a second. I know those mental judgments. I understand those. And if 1 million people got together to agree on a lie, that's not impossible. That's not inconceivable. That's mentally possible. Out of the 3 mental judgments, for 1 million people or even 1 billion people to gather and agree to a lie, it is conceivable to the mind. So what are you talking about? The answer is that we're not talking about mental impossibility here. When we say it's not conceivable, we don't mean the mental impossibility here. Here we mean the normal impossibility. That's called al-mustahilu adatan, what's impossible normally. Not al-mustahilu aqlan, what's impossible mentally. We're not talking about what's impossible mentally here. We're talking about what's impossible normally. لا يتصور تواطؤهم على الكذب. It's normally impossible. So someone might say, well, Normally, not normal. If it's not impossible, then where's your proof? The answer is, the proof is in the fact that when we talk about something being normally impossible, then what that means is for it to happen would be supernatural. That's like the miracles of the prophets. When the prophets do miracles, why is the miracle of a prophet proof? Because it's normally impossible. Who's going to throw a stick on the ground and turns into a dragon, a real one? Or it points at the moon and then the moon splits into two pieces.
Yeah.
And the likes of those things that the prophets have performed. Supernatural feats performed by the prophets. Mu'jizat. So what makes the mu'jiza a proof? What makes it a proof is the fact that it's normally impossible. Or else somebody else could just come and say, oh, that's nothing. You point at the moon and split in two pieces. That's nothing. I'll point at the moon and make it split into four pieces. You can't do it. It's impossible normally. So likewise, Mutawaatir news is going to be authentic 100% because the numbers of people who are conveying this same information are so great that it's normally impossible that they would have gathered to conspire to the lie. For that many people to gather and conspire to a lie would be supernatural. So we're not going to say it was supernatural. We're just going to say it didn't happen. They didn't conspire to a lie. Rather, we're going to say this news is true. And to make it clearer for you, take a judge. If someone comes to the judge and lies to the judge, if the judge is sharp, he'll discover that lie and cut right through it. Now, that's one person. The more people you add to the caper, the easier it's going to be to tear the lie down. Because they have to agree. So take a judge. You got, let's say, 2 or 3 people, and they came in with a story. All the judge has to do is just keep asking questions, one by one. All what they're saying is just going to fall apart. So if 2 people or 3 people can't stick to a lie, how's a whole nation of people going to stick to a lie, for example, that they conspired to? It's not going to happen. But it's possible that a lie gets transmitted and the people think it's true. We're not talking about that, though. That's why there's conditions for Tawaatur. Like, for example, what's an example of a lie that got transmitted and people think it's true? That Jesus died on the cross. Since the time of Prophet Isa alayhi salatu wassalam, that's when that lie started. Because Allah raised him to the sky. And then he put the appearance of Jesus upon someone else, one of his companions, according to some scholars. That's what we go by. One of his companions, not a kafir. And then they came, the Jews, they took his companion and they killed him. And then they said, we killed Jesus, the messenger of Allah. Meaning, they were making fun of him by calling him the messenger of Allah. So, but his Sahaba who were with him, and they saw him go up through the opening in the ceiling. They saw him. There were 12 of them. They saw him go up through the opening in the ceiling. And he was raised up to the sky. But the scholars said the people of the Injil were not meticulous scholars like the scholars of Muhammad's nation. Nor the people of the Torah. Neither the people of the Torah nor the people of the Injil were like the people of the Quran in terms of being meticulous and exact and checking, etc., double checking, triple checking, etc. So the lie spread, and that's it. They said, we killed Jesus. Then they all said, oh no, Jesus is killed. With no verification, without proper verification. And then the lie spread. So, وهو الثابت على ألسنة قوم لا يتصور تواطؤهم على الكذب. Tawatur, successive mass narration, is verified news upon the tongues of some folk whose conspiring to a lie is inconceivable, meaning normally impossible. So you should know that there's 3 types of impossibilities. There's the mental impossibility, there's the normal impossibility, and there's the religious impossibility.
So can you say necessary mental possibility and mental impossibility?
Say that again.
Can you say the mental, I got down for mental judgments,
Mm-hmm.
necessary,
Mm-hmm.
mental possibility,
Mm-hmm.
and mental impossibility?
Correct. Those are mental judgments. The mental necessity, mental impossibility, and mental possibility. Those are the mental judgments. Now, if you take just the impossible part, if we want to break down that, then the scholar said there's 3 types of impossibilities. There's a mental impossibility, which we just now mentioned. There's a normal impossibility, which we also just mentioned. So normally impossible is not mentally impossible. And then there's the religious impossibility. Religious impossibility goes back to one of the other 2 also.
Okay.
So what's an example of a religious impossibility? Like a prophet after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's religiously impossible. It's not mentally impossible. Because Allah sends prophets. He sent prophets one after the next, one after the next, one after the next. He told us in the Quran. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, He told us He sent prophets one after the next. He kept sending them. Every time He would send a prophet, the people would belie him, and then Allah would destroy them, and then He'd send another. So there's nothing in the mind alone that makes Muhammad the last prophet. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If Allah willed, there would have been a prophet to come after him. But the religion told us that there is no prophet after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning Prophet Muhammad taught us that. So the religious judgment deems a prophet after Muhammad to be impossible, religiously impossible. Another example is the paradise and hell. For paradise and hell to come to an end, that's religiously.
That's belief in Ibn Taymiyyah.
Yeah, for hellfire.
Yeah.
Not for paradise. For paradise and hell to come to an end, that's religiously impossible, not mentally impossible. Had Allah willed for them to come to an end, they would. But He told us in His book that they shall never come to an end. So they will never come to an end. That's religiously impossible. So the impossibility we're talking about here is the normal impossibility that all those people would conspire to a lie. وَهُوَ الثَّابِتُ عَلَى أَلْسِنَةِ قَوْمٍ. The successive mass report is the verified news upon the tongues of a folk. A folk whom لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ تَوَاطُؤُهُمْ عَلَى الْكَذِبِ. Their conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. How many is that? Scholars had different sayings. Some said 4, some said 10, some said 70, some said 300.
Which one is consensus?
There is not a consensus, but there's a stronger saying of all the sayings. The strongest saying of all the sayings is there's not a particular number.
Okay. So it's left open.
Yes, to the circumstance.
Okay.
It goes back to the circumstance. So, for example, if you had 10 righteous men, let's say 10 righteous men, righteous, trustworthy, knowledgeable, God-fearing men, then and every single one of them told you the same thing, then because of the circumstance here, you can count that as tawaatur. As opposed to if you had 10 scoundrels. 10 scoundrels all told you something. Something, not true or false, just something. Then you still have room here to doubt. You say, that's 10 guys, man, but some of those dudes, or all of them, they're all scoundrels. I'm not convinced. So even though the number is the same in both cases, in one case, 10 upright, trustworthy, God-fearing scholars told you the same thing. So you were so convinced. And in the other case, 10 dirty, rotten scoundrels told you the same thing. And then you weren't convinced. So the stronger saying is, there is not one number that's always mutawaatir. They said rather it goes back to the circumstance or circumstances. So then it's like what An-Nasafi says here. You can just say what An-Nasafi said, then those words, the way he says it, that's fine and valid. And then if you need to explain to your student, then you'll break it down for him. Okay. So what does Nasafi say? And this is correct. It is the verified news upon the tongues of some people that their conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. Correct. Then that one says to you, Ustad or Sheikh, how many is that? Then you'll explain for him. Maybe sometimes you're not even going to go there. Depends on your discussion, your topic, who you're talking to. Okay. Like you might be talking to a hadith denier. He knows the word tawaatur. He knows what it means. You don't have to go into the numbers. Or you might be talking to an atheist or philosopher. Or you might be talking to an Orientalist who studied Islam. Kafir. He has real knowledge. He's not ignorant. He knows fiqh. He knows nahu. So he might know what you're talking about, for example. You'll look into your situation there. Who said, so you can have a documentation, who said that the strong saying is that there's no particular number? Among them is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani.
Al-Hafiz.
Nah. Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he said the strong saying is there's no particular number for tawaatur. Here, I have his book right here in my hand. The explanation of Nukhbatul Fikr. I'll read to you his quote. He says, here, he says, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَيَّنَهُ فِي الْأَرْبَعَةِ. Some of them determined that tawaatur is at least 4. وَقِيلَ فِي الْخَمْسَةِ. And it was said 5. وَقِيلَ فِي السَّبْعَةِ. And it was said 7. وَقِيلَ فِي الْعَشَرَةِ. And it was said 10. وَقِيلَ فِي الْإِثْنَيْ عَشَرِ. And it was said 12. وَقِيلَ فِي الْأَرْبَعِينَ. And it was said 40. وَقِيلَ فِي السَّبْعِينَ. And it was said 70. وَقِيلَ غَيْرُ ذَلِكَ. And other than that was said. وَتَمَسَّكَ كُلُّ قَائِلٍ بِدَلِيلٍ. And every sayer who chose a number, he had a proof, a reference. جاء فيه ذكر ذلك العدد فأفاد العلم. Anyone who chose one of those numbers has a reference that number appeared in the reference he'll give you, and knowledge was achieved in whatever the reference is. It's going to say, look, they had knowledge here and there was only 4 of them. Or look, they had knowledge here, there was 7 of them, for example. He says, وَلَيْسَ بِلَازِمٍ أَنْ يَطَّرِدَ فِي غَيْرِهِ. He said, however, it's not binding that it will be consistent. لِاحْتِمَالِ الِاخْتِصَاص. Because of the possibility of the circumstances having an effect on that. Yani, paraphrasing. Because of the possibility, yani, because we need to regard the circumstances also, not just merely the number only. Like, for example, this Council of Nicaea, in which they conspired to come up with a Bible. That's a conspiracy there. How many of them were there? There were a lot of them. I don't know how many, but they say there was many of them. So it was still a conspiracy, though. So the circumstances show that it's a conspiracy. So وَهُوَ الثَّابِتُ عَلَى أَلْسِنَةِ قَوْمٍ. The successive mass report is what is confirmed upon the tongues of a people. لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ تَوَاطُؤُهُمْ عَلَى الْكَذِبِ. A people whose conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. So what are these conditions then? We said that has to be based on witnessing. So that means it has to be it has to be based on an event. An event first. Not an idea, for example. Not a deduction. Has to be an event. That's one. So, for example, the news about heaven. We never saw that. None of us saw that. The people on earth haven't seen that. So even if all the people were saying, there's a heaven, it's not going to be khabar mutawaatir. Has to be based on an event, number one. Number two, that was witnessed. That means they saw it with their eyes, and then they turned around and told others after them. Or they heard it, and then they turned around and told others after them. An example that's mentioned in the Quran is the story of the elephant in Surah Al-Fil. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. Did you not see, O Muhammad, what your Lord did to the Abyssinians when they came with the elephant to destroy the Kaaba? Alam tara, didn't you see it, Muhammad? Well, Muhammad was born then, at that year. That was the year he was born. He didn't see that. So what does that mean? Alam tara, didn't you see it, Muhammad? It means, didn't you see the traces? Don't you know about it? Didn't that reach you, Muhammad, by way of Tawaatur? All of you Arabs know that. You know it, Muhammad, and all the other Arabs know it too. Then, at that time. Y'all all know about that. That was a big event that happened. That's what made the people respect the people of the Haram. The Abyssinians came with the elephant, and then Allah sent birds, and the birds bombed them with rocks that went through their head, penetrated their heads, and came out from their undersides, from their bottoms. We'll see. Hold on.
Okay.
So that's a Tawaatur news. The Prophet knew that not because he saw it with his eyes, and the Arabs at his time also, but because it was Tawaatur for them. So it has to be an event, has to be witnessed, and it has to be conveyed by so many people that it's impossible that they conspired. Yeah, and it has to be conveyed in such a way that the many people who conveyed it, it's not conceivable that they conspired to a lie. And another condition is that this abundance of narrators does not decrease.
Okay.
So it's possible that something would start Tawaatur and then it fizzles out. Then the Tawaatur goes away. And also, it's possible that something starts off not as Tawaatur, but then it becomes Tawaatur. So in this case, if it starts not Tawaatur, then really it's not Tawaatur, even though it's so famous. For example, the Prophet ﷺ taught one of his daughters to say, "Ma sha'Allahu kan, wa ma lam yasha' lam yakun." Whatever Allah willed to be shall be, and whatever He did not will to be shall not be. So he taught that to one of his daughters. So that's not Tawaatur. She's one person. But that spread to all the nation. Now all the Muslims say, "Ma sha'Allahu kan, wa ma lam yasha' lam yakun." So is it now because all the Muslims say this statement means it's Tawaatur? Not originally, no. It's not Tawaatur. Because it started off not by a big number of people who couldn't have conspired to a lie. He says, وَهُوَ مُوجِبٌ لِلْعِلْمِ ضَرُورِي. And this type of report dictates also necessary knowledge, like sound senses, dictates necessary knowledge. So that means knowledge will be born in you. Now, some people disputed that. They said, "La, that's not necessary knowledge from Tawaatur. That's acquired knowledge from Tawaatur."
Okay.
But Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said that saying is nothing. This is correct saying here. Tawaatur give you necessary knowledge. What's the proof for that? The proof for that is the children who get knowledge by Tawaatur, although they don't yet have the mind for deducing and concluding, drawing the right conclusions, like putting the premises and conclusions together. Their minds are not yet, the little children whose minds are not yet sophisticated enough to put premises together properly and then draw the right conclusions. And also they didn't do research. Like what? Like, don't the children know that the Kaaba exists even if they never saw that? And they know that Prophet Muhammad existed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they never saw him. And many things they know by way of Tawaatur. So then how do they know that when they're not yet sophisticated enough to deduce that? And also they don't have the expertise needed to do research so that they can know it by research. So how did they know it then? And this is not a guess here we're talking about. And this is not an assumption. They're not just assuming the Kaaba exists only. They really know it, really, without having ever seen it. So how is that? By Tawaatur. So that's a proof that Tawaatur gives you necessary knowledge. That means knowledge that will be born in you. Basically means once that information passes on you enough, you're going to know it's true with the right, all the conditions. This is
what. So that means it's daruri.
Yes, ilm daruri. And here, this realm where we are right now, this realm of hearing something a lot, and then you're going to know, this is a vague area sometimes. This is where a lot of people have misconceptions about things. Because, why? Because they heard something so many times that they started to think that it's true. And it wouldn't be true. But it wouldn't be a case of Tawaatur either. but they would think it is because they never heard otherwise.
Okay.
So a person would say to you, what are you talking about? I never heard anything like that before. You on some cuckoo stuff. No, I'm not on no cuckoo stuff. You just didn't hear before. But everybody I ever heard from, I never heard anybody say what you're saying. Oh, subhanallah. But it's the case though. So when someone's like that, he would think that he has knowledge about something, and he wouldn't. And it would not be a case of tawaatur. It would only be a case that he never heard otherwise. MashaAllah. So then you have to clarify that for a person. And you might not be able to convince him if you don't have strong enough argument for him, because he thinks he has knowledge by tawaatur. He might not even know what tawaatur is, really. But he just never heard what you're saying before. So it's like he thinks he got it by tawaatur without knowing what tawaatur is, and he thinks you're lying or something, or you're mistaken. So that's an important thing there. That's where sometimes you're going to have to clarify for a person his issue. And he's not going to be inclined to listen to you because he thinks that you're telling him something that nobody else is saying, and wouldn't be the case. وَهُوَ مُوجِبٌ لِلْعِلْمِ الضَّرُورِي. So this type of report is indicative of, or it dictates necessary knowledge. Ilm daruri. And then An-Nasafi rahimahullah, he gives an example. كالعلم بالملوك الخالية في الأزمنة الماضية. Like the knowledge of the kings of old in the past times. Pharaoh and Hitler, Napoleon, even the prophets. Jesus really existed. Some people might think he didn't exist. I mean, we know that. We know Jesus really existed, but even if we take our religious belief out of it, he really existed actually though. His news was widespread until today, till it reached us today. And Moses too. We're not believing in Moses just because it came in religious books. He really existed, and his news was famous and enduring until today. MashaAllah. Wal buldani na'iyah, and also like the faraway lands. China is our usual go-to for an example. So you ask your crowd, any of you been to China? So if no one has, and you say, any of you doubt that China exists? So nobody will. Or any person who's traveled to another land somewhere. Like when he got there, he wasn't like, now I'm sure that this land exists because I see it now. He already knew. When he saw it, he didn't become more sure. That's how the fact that he knew it really. A person who never saw the Kaaba, when he finally sees it, he's going to say, now I'm sure that this Kaaba is real. He will have already been knowing that. By tawaatur. So no. So that concludes his talk about al-khabar al-mutawaatir.
Okay.
Then he wants to talk about the other type of truthful information. He says, وَالثَّانِي خَبَرُ الرَّسُولِ الْمُؤَيَّدِ بِالْمُعْجِزَةِ. The second type of truthful information is the news of a messenger who is supported with miracles. But let's stop here for today, insha'Allah ta'ala, so we can start this one from the top. Because we need to unravel this.
News of a messenger what? Appearing?
The news of a messenger who is supported with miracles. Because what he's basically going to say is another way you can get definitive 100% information, correct information, is for a man who claims to be a prophet and he performed a miracle to tell you in your face something. We're not talking about receiving the hadith through transmission of chain here. That's different. There's a difference between Abu Bakr hearing the hadith from the Prophet himself and the Tabi'i hearing the hadith from Abu Bakr.
He was a witness to it.
Yeah, because Abu Bakr was a witness to the Prophet, to the miracle performing Prophet. So the certainty that Abu Bakr has is different from the certainty of the other one after him. Because Abu Bakr, possibly, for example, his tongue could have slipped. Maybe he didn't say something right. Or possibly his tongue didn't slip. He could have just possibly paraphrased. And he didn't say exactly the words that the messenger said.
Mental possibilities of three types: mental, normal, and religious, right?
Mental No. Take off mental there. Just impossibility is of three types. Impossibility is of three types: mental, normal, and religious.
I have mental there. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, but what you asked me was, you said the mental impossibility is three types: mental, normal, and religious.
Right.
So no, just impossibility is three types.
Oh, impossibilities are three types.
Yes.
Okay.
One of those is mental.
Okay. All right. Got you.
No. So we'll save the rest of this talk here for next week if Allah permits. And we'll unravel his talk here, inshallah.
No.
But just one other example, though, I want to give you here. I gave you the example of...
Oh, before you go there, what book is that from? How does it come from?
That's the explanation of Nukhbatul Fikr. Sharh Nukhbatul Fikr. Nukhbatul Fikr, that's Ibn Hajar's own metin. And then he did the sharh for it too. In hadith terminology, mustalah.
Nukhbatul Fikr.
Nukhbatul Fikr. Here, I'll type it for you.
Nukhbatul Fikr.
Here, I'll type it in the chat for you here. Bismillah. Nukhbatul Fikr. Nukhbatul Fikr.
Nukhbatul Fikr.
With a kha, nukhbatu.
Oh, Nukhbatul.
Naam. People famously call it Nukhba.
Nukhba.
Naam. And Nukhba, that's famous book of Ibn Hajar. Okay. So that's the metin. Nukhbatul Fikr is the metin. And he did the sharh for it too. It's sharh Nukhbatul Fikr. Yeah, so I wanted to give you another example too about news that's not Mutawaatir. I gave you the example of the crucifixion of Jesus. It's not Mutawaatir. Right. Also, the Bible. It's not Mutawaatir. Also, what? The news of the Jews that Moses said that his sacred law is the last law, and that no prophet shall come after him, but that he shall follow the law of the Torah. That's a fabrication of the Jews on the part of rabbis who wish to keep their power. But Moses never denied that there's a sacred law after his. And they don't have any way to verify that. In fact, the whole Torah is not Mutawaatir. Yeah,
it's not, right?
It's not. And look, I mean, here, we know this Torah is perverted. Even even if it were authentic copy, like at the time of Prophet Muhammad, they still had authentic copies. Even if it were authentic copy, it's not mutawaatir. Because of the story of Uzair. The story of Uzair, which is that the Jews, they didn't used to be hafiz of the Torah, sometimes only. Not like the nation of Muhammad, so many hafiz of Quran. So they didn't used to be hafiz of Torah, but rarely. And then, long story short, they got attacked by Nebuchadnezzar, kafir tyrant, who ransacked Jerusalem. And he practically did genocide on the Jews. They were Muslims, though, at that time. And they had the Torah. And so, in their desperation, they wrapped up the Torah and buried it so that they could retrieve it later. And he put Jerusalem under dirt, the whole city. And he took them captive back to Iraq. And so anyway, after some time, one of them, he left there. He went back to Jerusalem. It was still in ruins. That's Uzair. His story is in Surah Al-Baqarah. So Allah made him die for 100 years and then brought him back to life. He was a hafiz of Torah. So he came back to life, and then he went back to his people. And by that time, they were old. He came back just, when he died, he was like 40 years old. His hair was still black. His muscles were still round. And so when he came back the way he died. Still a strong man with some youth. And so he went back to his people. The children were old then. His own son is like 100 years old. 100 something years old. Or no, 100, because his wife was pregnant when he died. So his own son is 100 years old. White hair, curved backs, sagging skin, all those people. So long story short, they said, "You're Uzair." If you're Uzair, his son said, "My mother told me that my father has a birthmark between his shoulder blades." So he showed him. But he still wanted to be extra sure. The people did. So they said, Uzair knew where the Torah was buried. They lost the Torah at this point. They didn't have any hafiz. They didn't have a nuskha. They didn't have a copy. So there's no Mutawaatir here. They said Uzair knew where the Torah was buried. If you are Uzair, show us. So he took them. So they uncovered it. They dug it. They pulled it out. They unwrapped it, but it was ruined. But he was a hafiz of the Torah. So he recited it to them from his memory, every single ayah from beginning to end, and he didn't mess up. And that's how they retrieved it. They retrieved the Torah because of Uzair. So that means it's not Mutawaatir. Uzair was not a prophet. That's a strong saying. He was not a prophet. His body decayed. The prophets' bodies don't decay. His body decayed and then Allah brought him back. And his donkey decayed and Allah brought his donkey back. It's all in the ayah. But the revival of his donkey is in the ayah. The revival of his own body is in the tafsirs.
Okay.
It was said first, Allah made his heart come back so that he could think. And then Allah made his eyes come back so that he could see himself come back. And then he saw his own body regenerate. And then the angel asked him, "How long have you been here?" He said, "I've been here for a day or a part of a day." The angel told him, "You've been here for 100 years. Look at your donkey." The bones were there scattered. And then he said, now see how Allah revives it. And then he saw the bones start coming back together. All the bones connected back, and then the nerves and veins started coming out, and then the muscles started coming, and then the skin came over, and then the hair came out, and it was just dead. Then the angel came and blew the soul of the donkey into its nostrils, and then it became alive. And then that's when he went back to his people. So he's not a prophet. So their whole Torah is not by Mutawaatir, even if it were authentic. Tayyib. Allah knows best. We'll stop there.